What's up, Stitches? Welcome to the Ranney Knits podcast. My name is Justine Ranney and I knit a lot, hence the name Ranney Knits. It is November and we are quickly approaching December, which means we are in prime sweater wearing weather. I have knit quite a few sweaters. If you haven't checked in with me before, I love knitting sweaters. And I really enjoy wearing my hand knit sweaters, but if I'm going to be completely honest, some of my hand knit sweaters have been more successful than others, and especially the ones that I knit when I just started knitting sweaters. Knitting sweaters, how many times have I said knitting sweaters? When I first started making garments, I don't know if that wink was successful at all. When I first started making garments, I was a little bit, I just started, so everything's a learning process, right? So I didn't know exactly how to pick the right wool or choose the right fit, and that's just my process of learning. I'm a trial and error person. So hopefully if you are just starting knitting sweaters, or maybe you're just thinking about it, you'll do a little bit more research than I did. But honestly, it's really hard to take what somebody tells you on YouTube or something that you read in a book and apply it to your knitting. I honestly think it's just about practicing and figuring out how to make something that you're going to love to wear. So if your first couple attempts at making a sweater aren't 100% successful, I wouldn't write it off entirely. I would just keep practicing. And I'm still, however many sweaters later, a year and a half of knitting sweaters later, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring things out, so it's just a process, and I've loved everything I made, especially right after finishing it. It's that kind of like cast off high you get where you just are like totally obsessed with your project that you've been working on for so long. But this is more, but upon some reflection, I've realized things that I could have tweaked and made these garments a little bit better. So I'm going to start with what I'm currently wearing. This is the Campside Pullover by Alicia Plummer. This was the second ever sweater that I'd ever knit. I started this August of last year, and it was a pretty quick knit. This is meant to be a DK weight, and I'm pretty sure I knit this in a worsted weight. So this was part of a knit along that a friend of mine was doing. She was knitting the Campside Pullover and wanted people to join in with her. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to try out knitting a sweater. So the first sweater that I knit was, I'm going to need a different word for sweater because I've already said it too many times. The first sweater that I knit was made out of acrylic yarn, and I followed a drops pattern, and if you're familiar with drops patterns, they are free, but they are not always the most well written, and they're pretty good resource, I guess. Drops has done a few things, especially lately, that I've kind of thought wasn't really okay. They've produced a couple patterns that look very, very similar to already written patterns that are very recognizable, so I'm personally not going to be using any drops patterns, which it doesn't really matter to them because they have free patterns. So anyways, this is not a spill tea about drops. spill tea? Is that even the right? I don't know. Anyways, we're not talking about drop sweaters. That was the first sweater. It was not very successful, and so for all intents and purposes, this is my first sweater. The yarn I used in this sweater was from a auction for a thrift store. So it was an auction that I'm not really sure where they got all the auction things. They were just, I don't know if they were donations or things that they found in the thrift store. Anyways, my mom went and she won 2 giant baskets full of yarn, and usually when somebody picks up yarn from a thrift store, it's acrylic or it's some kind of wool acrylic blend. It's very cheap, but sometimes you can score some pretty good deals. So one of the baskets had some Swans Island yarn. I'm not exactly sure what the content was, but high quality, very nice. Swans Island, is Swans Island American milled or American sourced? I'm not really sure, but it's good quality yarn. So that was in one basket. The other basket had a Swans Island pattern and I don't know, like 6 skeins of this yarn, but they were all caked up and they didn't have labels. So just based on the fact that the other one was Swans Island and had a Swans Island pattern and this one had a Swans Island pattern, I'm guessing that it was Swans Island, but there's no way to be sure. It's good quality yarn. It's it feels to me, it definitely has some alpaca in it. It's got that signature alpaca halo with kind of like wiry hairs. I don't know. Like, alpaca has a very distinct texture. And I want to say cotton. It might be an alpaca cotton blend. There might be some wool content in it. Not really sure. So there's my first mistake, not knowing what kind of yarn I was using. So that should be a big red flag for anybody who's knit sweaters before, not knowing what kind of yarn you're using. So because I didn't know exactly what the yarn was, I swatched, and I think I swatched a couple times, and I really played with the swatches. After they had blocked and dried, I kind of stretched them. I think I used the technique where you hang clothespins on the bottom to really mimic the weight of the finished garment. So when you do a tiny swatch, it doesn't have that weight to kind of like pull it down. So you put a little bit of weight on it, like a clothespin or something, so that it kind of stretches a little bit. And just there's different ways to mimic how a garment's gonna wear in your swatch. So with all that, I think I was pretty successful. So if you know anything about cotton and alpaca, you know that they're not the greatest things to make a sweater because they do stretch a lot. So after I wear this one for a little while, it does tend to get really baggy. The thing that's annoying is the sleeves don't stretch that much, so they're pretty tight. But it's kind of just a slouchy, comfortable sweater. I don't really mind the stretchiness of it and the slouch that the body has. My problem is that it's just too itchy for my princess skin. I don't handle very itchy material right next to my skin very well, so I wear this one with a long sleeve tee underneath. So the fact that I have to wear something underneath makes it not the most versatile thing to wear in the world. It's fine, it's very warm, and I don't live in a place that gets super cold. so it's not something that I choose to wear very often. And that's about it. There's not really anything I can do to change it. I mean, I can wear something underneath. That's basically the solution that I found to wearing this sweater. It's comfortable, and I think it looks pretty good, especially for like a second attempt at a sweater. Just the fact that I can wear it at all is pretty impressive, I would say. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I'm kind of impressed with myself. Now, I've shown this next one on the podcast before. This is my Quill Cardigan by Evie Scott, and it is called Quill because it's got this beautiful feather motif on the back. This is done with cables, and it is really an excellent pattern, and I highly recommend it. There have not been enough quill cardigans made, and just based on Ravelry, I think there's like, last time I checked there were like 100 or so projects, and that's not enough. This pattern deserves more love because it is really beautiful. It's got set-in sleeves, a garter stitch hem, not hem, bottom. It has pockets. My pocket skills were a little subpar, I'll admit, when I made this. They don't lie super flat, and they're just little pockets that kind of make it, they kind of stick out a little bit, and that makes it a little bit weird. But anyway, then it's got this shawl collar, and you'll notice that this is currently on needles because I finished this again in 2017. I think this was the one I did in September, October, and it's knit in Cascade 220, and this is, I don't know, silver or something. And that's the yarn that's recommended in this pattern. So it is on needles because the Cascade 220 is a pretty stiff, dense, I mean, it's not really that dense, but it's a pretty like sturdy workhorse yarn. And the shawl collar is knit on US size 4 needles. And the needles I was using at the time were my Addi Turbo Click interchangeable needles, and the US size 4 on those is absolutely terrible. The join catches. Most of the needles in that interchangeable set are okay, but the smaller they get, the worse the join gets. So with the 4s, it's nearly impossible to work with them. I don't ever use the size 4 needles in that set anymore just because it's so annoying. The yarn just catches, and I'm constantly pushing and pulling, and it's not an enjoyable knitting experience working with those needles. So I was knitting this on those awful needles, and I had to knit, I think it was, I don't remember how many inches you were supposed to knit for this shawl collar, but the shawl collar is pretty significant. I'm not exactly sure how many stitches are on here, but it's a big shawl collar, and it's a lot of knitting to get to 4 inches or whatever, how many inches it was supposed to be, 6 inches maybe. It was a lot of knitting to get to however many inches you were supposed to go, and I honestly burnt out using those needles. I quit, and I bound off, and it always bugged me a little bit that the shawl collar wasn't quite long enough. It was about maybe 2 inches shorter than I would have liked it to be, so when it folded over, it just was a little bit too short. It didn't have that nice drape. So yes, I knew it was going to be, I mean, it's an easy fix. It doesn't take a lot of thought. I just had to unravel it one row and pick up stitches and start knitting again. It's not the most fun project to work on, and I've had this on my needles for probably 3 or 4 weeks now, and I've just done, here's where I unraveled, so I've just done maybe about 1.5 inches at this point. I'm not exactly sure how much further I'm going to go, but hopefully that will fix it. Again, this is a pretty heavy-duty worsted weight sweater that doesn't get a whole lot of wear. Hopefully when I fix the shawl collar, it will be a little bit more wearable. It's very warm, and it's also made out of yarn that I just can't wear next to skin. It's a cardigan, so I'm gonna have to wear something underneath it. I'm not quite that daring in my fashion choices, but it's just, I do have to wear something underneath with sleeves, which can be a little bit of a hassle, but I think once I've fixed the shawl collar, it's going to be very wearable, and it's almost like a coat. So it's just got a little bit more collar on it. I think I can wear it more like a coat, and it'll be really, really nice. I didn't even realize it, but I'm talking about these sweaters in the order that I knit them. I knit this one first, the Quill sweater, September, October-ish 2017, and this last one was end of October, beginning of November 2017. So this is the last sweater that I knit in 2017, and it is the blue snowdrop sweater, and the designer is, can't remember her name, but her Instagram, Ravelry, and her website is Life is Cozy, and I made this as a test knit for her. So this is a free pattern, and you can get it on her website, and it's just is it a bottom up? It's been a while. I think this is a bottom up sweater, and it's got this yoke. I think this is the only yoke sweater that I've made bottom up. So I knit this out of Cloudborne Fibers, Superwash Merino Worsted Twist, and it's pretty long. It's kind of tunic length. There is some waist shaping. I don't know if I hold that up if you can't hear me, but so there's some waist shaping in it, and I knit a little bit of the color work on the sleeves. So this is my first colorwork sweater, and there are things I like about it, but one thing is, it's a big problem with colorwork yokes, is that it just is a little bit tight around the shoulders. I have sort of broad shoulders for my size, so that's pretty noticeable when it's a little bit tight around my shoulders. I did go up a needle size in order to make the colorwork not quite so tight. The other thing about the colorwork is I just used random different yarns that I had in my stash. So I have the light blue is the Cloudborne Worsted Twist. I think there's some Rowan in there. There's actually some of the same yarn that is in this sweater, so kind of like a little mishmash of different yarns. The fit on this sweater isn't ideal. I would obviously like the colorwork to be a little bit stretchier, a little bit looser. I probably should have gone up a size. I think this is the size small, meant for like a 34-inch bust, so there's not really any positive ease, and what I've learned is I don't really like sweaters that have either 0 positive ease or negative ease. I like them to fit a little bit looser. And the sleeves that I did are pretty tight. I was practicing color work on the sleeves, and it's pretty difficult to do a sleeve. It's pretty difficult to do a colorwork sleeve just because you have so little space to work with. It doesn't really stretch. Like on the yoke, it stretches because there's just so much material. But with the sleeve, it's hard to get it loose. I did go up a needle size on this, and I did work these inside out as well, so I was working them with the wrong side facing out, which usually stretches the floats a little bit. Anyway, in order to fix the sleeves, I would have to do some sweater surgery. I would have to cut these off and re-knit them, although these sleeves were knit bottom up, so not really sure how I'd be able to, I mean, I could cut it off and re-knit it, but then it would be going in the opposite direction. I don't know, I think I'll just deal with the sleeves. But the yoke, it's just, this sweater is just not really my cup of tea anymore. I don't wear it. I think I've worn it on the podcast a couple times. I've definitely said on the podcast that I'm in love with it, and I'm really not. I think there's pressure to absolutely love the things you've made, and that's not always the case. Like, they're not always successful, and that's okay. But yeah, I think in the last, especially the last couple months, I've come a lot further in my knowledge of how I like things to fit, and how to make things that fit the way I want. And I think that's allowed me to be a little bit more honest with myself when it comes to things like this. Like, this just isn't really for me. Also, there is some short row shaping. Oh yeah, I can tell the short row shaping now because you can see the difference in between the collar and the color work. It is, there's a little bit more blue in the back here, but it's not really, the short row shaping doesn't really work for me. It still kind of rides up when I'm wearing it, and that's one of the most annoying parts. So you've got this tight yoke, and you've got a sweater that wants to ride up into your neck, and it's just not a good feeling, not a comfortable feeling. So what I'm thinking about doing is sticking this and making it into a cardigan. So I've never sticked anything before, and it's a little bit intimidating, and especially something that wasn't meant to be steeked and you're doing it after the fact. But I'm gonna look into how to reinforce this and see if that's something that maybe is possible, because as a cardigan this might be okay. Like, I'm certainly not gonna ever wear this, and I don't know if you know, anybody that I would give this to, I have a feeling that they would just have the same problem as I do. Unless they're significantly smaller than me, this is just not going to be a comfortable thing to wear. So we're going to see how that goes. I think if I steek it and turn it into a cardigan, it's probably still not going to be something that I'm personally going to want to wear, but I would feel like a little bit better giving it away if it was something that I thought would be in any way wearable. So we'll see. I'll let you know how that goes. Hopefully I get to this at some point in the not so distant future. yeah, I don't really know how much time and effort goes into steeking. Like, if it's something that I could do in a day or two, I'll definitely get it done, but who knows? So I hope you enjoyed my little trip down memory lane into my ghosts of sweaters past. I hopefully will have some modified sweaters to show you in the not too distant future. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!